I've spent a lot of time arguing with people, and I'm not saying necessarily that I'm just some big fan of Charlie Kirk, but I get him and what he was trying to do. Is represent that we're all people, we're stuck here. Diversity of thought is very important in a cognitive society. Not everybody is going to get along, and not everybody should get along. And there are some people that he discusses and argues with that, they're just plain batshit crazy. One guy calls him a communist, and then he wants to liquidate the national forests so that there can be more housing. That is communism, you fucking halfwit. And my point on this whole thing, I didn't want to make a long video, but then anybody was probably going to watch it, right? But that I used to argue about religion all the time. I thought it mattered. And I wasn't ready, I never took it into the physicality of reality, of the physical world, but there are times when I've been put in my place, no matter how witty I am, arguing about religion, discussing religion, figuring out labels and how we're all defining things, that what you're really just trying to do is find common ground to accept one another without creating a prejudice that you can just be completely delusional and choose to be delusional. We're trying to fight that mental illness, and when I say we, it's critical thinkers, it's people who prefer logic over irrationality, just the sake of being right for the sake of it. Because you have a shooter who kills this guy, who's willing to talk to anybody, right? They'll argue with you till the end of time, unless you've just become a precedence of just wasting time. It's the same thing as if you give, and you give too much. You can give away your ability to give, and people will take that, and then they won't give, so then giving dies out, right? Well, when you're willing to just talk to people, where was I? Forgetting. Lost my train of thought. This guy wants to be right, and this is the perfect reason why all he did was create a martyr. And the martyring comes from the aspect of what he represents. That you could beat me, but instead you wouldn't even show your face to me. So this guy's willing to show his face to everybody. He's willing to be present, to actually, he doesn't have to be anonymous. I've won so many arguments over the years that it's at the point, I've been threatened countless times too, but I use anonymous accounts. And I try to do as much good as possible. But that's a side note. It's that the shooter is just going to not show his face, not show an argument, not show reasonability. It's only that I choose to be right because I choose to be right. So back to the original thing is that, we're creating these delusions in people, and that's one freedom of the Constitution that we don't have, is is the right to choose. However, when does it become a psychosis? When does it translate into that? Like, I have the right to choose to be that. I can just take a gun, go sit up on a ledge, and shoot somebody that I can't win against otherwise. And that makes you right. Will it ever really function that way? That we can only be right because we choose to be right? And will society succeed through that? It's one thing to believe in something, to fabricate it in your mind. As an inventor, I know that struggle. That I can have so many ideas, but to actually craft them and make them real as I am, at least, right? What the fuck is that? As real as I am, at least. That seems to be more right? And you can hold it all in your brain. You can choose anything you want. That's the freedom of choice. The freedom of imagination is another one that we don't have, because it needs to defend like logical psychosis, right? So the ability to imagine can be seen as a disease. And historically, throughout the 1900s, if you didn't explain yourself properly, you could be locked up just because you're not conveying an idea to somebody in a coherent manner, or you're not conveying an idea that they can comprehend. That it's a slippery slope in that regard. And so how does this guy become a martyr? Is that he presents himself, and the would-be retort is that you can never be right again. Is that like I said, I used to argue so much about religion, and there was this one girl in high school I loved discussing logical fallacies with her, and she beat me up like once or twice. Okay, I've lost very few arguments, and I owned up to it, accepted it, and goddamn did I want to date her, but I never got around to it. It just never worked out. But like those times at going to lunch and just discussing with her, and the times that she could beat me, are some of my fondest memories. And to think that somebody who's willing to go out and try to help people grasp that it's okay to be wrong, that you watch a lot of the videos of this guy, and yes, he's an asshole, he's arrogant at times, he's pompous, but also he's humble, he's intellectually decisive, there's a really great dynamic that represents the fact that we should not always be right. And this is another thing that even goes down to science. How science can become a religion is because you can only believe something is right. There is so much misinterpretation of data that the confoolery, eventually we will just cite facts back and forth to one another. And then if you have that, you exactly have the opposite too, which is a lot of these people, they're so sensitive because they want to be in their delusion. That's why they get defensive, because psychology tells us, a lot of times psychosis, when it is addressed, creates anger and aggression and energy and a fight-or-flight response, and people need to just find out. Just because you got a bunch of people wearing some hats sitting in an apartment together reading a book. You can watch that intellectual propensity where it's like reading was so magnificent. And that's because it provided us with all sorts of stimulus. That over time, all it became was this idea that it's better and greater and that it makes you a better person. And then eventually, it's people that think that reading everything makes them right just because. And they never go into their book. They never write down an argument for or against. People aren't questioning themselves just as much as they believe in themselves, and then you get more people, and then you get the flaws of democracy that form around that. And that democracy is not perfect. It never has been. It always fails every fucking time. Because it's a self-destructive system. The paradox of democracy, for democracy to exist, you have to be able to make choices, to make changes. And those changes that afford you the freedom inevitably will be changed. And now this is 11 minutes, I'm done.